Today's going to be a good one because we're talking about why no one wants to work anymore and how you can actually use the system to your advantage. On this channel, I love to talk about side hustles, making extra income, and how to be smart with your money. So if you love hearing about those topics and want to watch more videos just like this one, then you should definitely like and subscribe and stick around for this video. Now, hopefully I don't make too many people angry in this video, but I do think for the most part that most of us can agree on why most people don't want to work anymore, and that it's not just laziness and it doesn't just come down to people not wanting to put in enough effort in order to make a good living. So to get this starting off with reason number one, hard work doesn't pay off. Now, of course, there is a lot of value to working hard, and I'm someone who values working hard, and I think it does bring a lot of people happiness and fulfillment to not only work hard, but have a goal in life. But that's not the type of working hard I'm talking about here. I'm talking about when you are working for an employer as a W-2 employee at a 9 to 5. Hard work doesn't get you the promotion. It's definitely about who you know, about how you work with your coworkers, and it actually has very little to do with your competency in your role. The person that's friends with the boss or goes to happy hour with them or even just socializes more outside of work is the one who's going to get promoted over you if you just are quiet and mind your business. And as someone who has lived through this before, I know that people actually never like the person who is kind of just quiet, minds their own business, comes in on time, does their job, and leaves on time. You would think that person, as long as they are excelling at their job, would actually get the promotion, but we all know that's not how it works. So my advice for this is stop being the person who works harder than everyone else and instead just try to work smarter than everyone else. No, you don't need to stay past office hours or go the extra mile for something that ultimately isn't going to pay off. The next reason is toxic work environments. People quit bosses in leadership and not actual job positions. If your immediate boss is someone who's just impossible to work with or micromanages you, then you are not going to like the position, no matter how much you actually may enjoy the tasks that you're doing on a regular basis. A lot of it is environment based, and there are so many situations where bosses and environments in general have just become so toxic, and that's become very normalized for people to kind of just hate their job. And that's what's really sad, is it's more common, I think now more than ever, for people to just casually talk about how much they hate their job. And most of the time it's because there's poor leadership, there isn't good structure, and they feel overworked and underpaid. That's why no one wants to work anymore. They don't want to be stretched as thin as possible while also completely getting passed up for any sort of raise or bonus. Now let's get to the best one, which is, of course, money. Now, the real fact is careers used to support a good life, and now they barely allow you to scrape by. Building a career used to actually be more worth it and feel more worth it, because not only could it cover the cost of living, but it could cover the cost of living for a family as well as savings and building for the future. And this is kind of more of the world that I think our parents grew up in, that the kind of world that they were in when they were in their 20s is I totally understand why building a career was so insanely worth it for them and why it was so motivating to go to college, get a good degree, and just kind of grind it out in the beginning and work your way up the ladder. And it really did pay off. And I do have firsthand experience with that with my parents. My dad was the sole income earner in our family when I was growing up, and he was able to support our family off of that income and not only get us barely scraping by, but making sure that we had a good life. And I do think that now it's becoming so much more difficult to actually build a career and have that fuel a good life. And that's why people are so jaded and why they don't want to work anymore. And now it kind of feels like you work and you climb the ladder, and for what? That's kind of the question that it feels like. Just so you can barely scrape by and maybe have a little bit of money for savings. And then it's like, why even build a career in the first place? And I think that is really why so many young people especially are so jaded, and they might come off as lazy because they don't see the value in pursuing a career. The motivation to go the extra mile at a company completely goes out the window when you're barely even affording to live a normal life. So why wouldn't someone want to kind of just go into work, do the bare minimum to not get fired, and then go home and try to actually enjoy their life somewhat? It makes perfect sense. Company loyalty also used to be much higher, and it used to be a lot more common for people to stay at jobs for 20 years, 30 years, like build their entire career at a job. And at least if you think about the people who are in their 50s now, I've heard so many stories of people who built careers at companies and stayed somewhere for even like 10 to 15 years, and they really, really grew their career there. They might have started off in a much lower position and now they're like in an upper management position and doing very well. I think a lot of that has really just become a lot more irrelevant now. The only way to grow your career now is mostly by job hopping. And then it's ironic because then I think people around our age, young people in their 20s, also get yelled at for being job hoppers and being not loyal and only caring about themselves and being selfish or whatever the criticism is about job hopping, especially in your 20s. And it's like, why wouldn't we job hop? You know, there's no loyalty from the company side. So why would they expect any of it back? It's become the only option is job hopping. There's a lot of times you can exhaust all of your resources at a certain company and position. And if there's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to go. There's nothing you can do about it. You can be the best employee ever. There could even be an opening and they still won't promote you. And that's a choice they want to make. Then what are we left to do? We're just left to leave and then job hop. And that's the only way we can actually build our income. A really big thing to kind of understand and accept too is that the job and the work environment and your boss is what matters, not the type of work you're doing. So this is something I would even give as advice to anyone younger, or honestly just anyone who's struggling in their kind of like work life, is it doesn't matter how much you love or hate the actual task that you're doing. It matters that you find a company that you can be happy at with the daily work environment. So for example, I found a job that I truly love. I love what I actually do, but that doesn't replace being at a company that doesn't serve me well for multiple reasons. And that will vary from person to person as what defines a good job to you. That will be different for everyone. Loving what you do will never make up for being in a bad environment while you're doing it. I would encourage anyone who might be struggling to find a job that has the type of structure that works for you and stop getting caught up so much in like what the actual role is as far as like what your tasks are or what skills are required to do the job. So now let's get in what to actually do about it, because we don't want to just sit around and kind of be negative and explain why everything is horrible right now. And instead, we want to actually do something about it. The first thing to understand here is that having flexibility creates happiness. The fact is, you perceive a job as less emotionally taxing when you don't feel forced to do it, or forced to do it a certain way. The fact is, most people do not like being forced to do anything, and even just having flexibility makes you perceive the job as easier than it is. You can find a position, for example, with a boss that gives you a little bit of freedom or doesn't micromanage you. The job is just going to be a lot easier for you to actually do. Also think there's kind of a lot of childish behavior when it comes to corporate and in the 9-to-5 world. So finding a position where you feel like you're actually treated like an adult, which is shocking how hard it actually is to find a place that treats people like this. Being in a position where you feel mutual respect, right? Like you respect your boss and you feel like they respect you back is one of the most valuable things that you can find. So that's what you want to chase after. That's what you want to pursue, not as much the going the extra mile, staying late, coming in early to be the guy who works the hardest to get promoted. That's not really gonna pay off. I would just job hop until you find a good, healthy work environment. Someone really values your input and the skills that you bring to the table instead of trying to undermine you or trying to test you or feeling like in strange competition with you. I've had this before, mostly with younger bosses or younger people that are higher in rank than me, where there's this strange thing where they kind of want to like prove how much more they know than you. And to me, I just don't play any of those games. I'm aware of my experience level. I don't have any interest in like proving myself to people. Like, I know what kind of value I bring. And if they want to get into this strange thing of trying to almost like catch me slipping up, I've had things like that before. That's kind of what creates these unhealthy and like toxic work environments, I think, that people talk about. That's just one example. You want to find a company that you can work for with leadership that is healthy and where someone is really there trying to help you be better, trying to maybe be a mentor for you, or is actually really rooting for you. And that's surprisingly hard to find. The next one that no one really wants to hear because no one likes to save money, but you want to start building an emergency fund ASAP. The powerful thing that happens here is when you finally do have an emergency fund that's substantial, you slowly get further and further away from relying on a company to survive. And this, I think, also creates a lot of disdain in employees, is that feeling where I have to go to work. If I don't, bad things are going to happen, be able to pay my bills. And so it creates this resentment towards going into work. And even if you find a job you like, you'll find a way to not like it because of the position that you're in life. The closer and closer you get and the more you build this emergency fund up, you are literally getting further away from having to rely on that company to pay for you to just survive and live off basic expenses. And again, that creates more freedom and flexibility, going back to what I said earlier, where you perceive not only your job, but also your life as better because you don't feel trapped and forced to stay somewhere you don't want to be just because you can't survive without it. And with building an emergency fund, there also is a lot of value in having people to kind of be in your corner and having people that are working towards a goal together. This works for any goal that you might have. If you're kind of feeling like there's no way you can save any extra money, like how will I actually get to this point where I have a big cushion where I could actually afford to lose my job and not really care? Like, that's a crazy feeling to have. And I think something that people feel is out of reach. You can get there by saving an emergency fund and also working on it with someone else. And when you have a shared goal like that, you can really bounce off of each other's energy. And let's say you find someone else who's also kind of trying to do the same thing as you. You can share with each other when you hit certain milestones, or like, hey, I skipped going out to dinner tonight and I just put $25 into my emergency fund. And then the next person can say, hey, I was about to spend all this money online shopping. That's normally what I would do. But instead, I just put everything in the cart and I didn't check out. And now I just put that $100 into my emergency fund. It's these little steps and wins that when you share that with someone, you make each other better and you really bounce off each other's positive wins. And even when it's not you, even when the other person is just saying, hey, I did this today and now I put $50 extra to my emergency fund, even though that's the $50 going towards theirs, it will encourage you to also kind of match that same energy. And that is something that's really, really valuable, and you'll get to your goal 10 times faster. There's so many ways to do this. You could set up little mini goals and then major goals with someone else and kind of talk about them and check in maybe once a day or once a week if it feels too much. And maybe you can say, hey, like, here's one thing that I went without today that I really am not going to care about. And now it's going to my emergency fund. And little things like that are how you build up a good savings without dreading it and without feeling like, ugh, now I just can't even live the life I had before. You don't have to give up everything you had before to start saving. Last one that I obviously have to mention because it's kind of the biggest one, have side hustles or some sort of independent income stream that is separate from your 9-to-5 or your W-2 employee income. So you still have something if you lose your job. So even if you have $0 saved, $0 in an emergency fund, if you have even just one other income stream that is not your 9-to-5 job, you still have that coming in that may be able to cover just bare minimum living expenses while you find another job. And that alone could prevent you into going into debt. Say better case scenario, maybe you've already managed to save $5,000 in an emergency fund while you were at your job and you get laid off. If you have that cushion plus you've already had another side income getting built up, honestly, you don't really have to worry. It obviously depends on your expenses. I'm using this as like an arbitrary number for an example. But for most people, that would at least get them to a point where they can breathe and they don't feel stressed to just take the first job that they can get. Because no one also wants to be in that position either, where you're kind of just desperate and will take the first offer. That's how people consistently undercut themselves. And how they don't get paid what they're worth is by being in that position in the first place. So having some sort of side income really does do a lot more than what it looks like on the surface. It kind of just looks like, oh, it's nice to have some extra money, but it's actually a lot more meaningful than that. And if you leverage it properly, it can literally save you from having to stay at a job that is toxic or you become completely burnt out. It can also just make you perceive the job you are doing as better and more fulfilling because you don't feel so trapped and like you have to stay there. So those were my thoughts on why no one wants to work anymore, and also what you can actually do about these things to take back some of the control and power into your own hands and not just get wrapped up in complaining about the realities that things are harder now than they used to be. That's true, but also let's think about what we can do about them. So hopefully some of these things of what to actually do about it will come in handy for you. And like I said, if you would like to learn more about increasing your income, side hustles, and just good money habits in general, then definitely subscribe because that's what I talk about on this channel. And you can click here to watch some of my other content, and I will see you in the next video.